Hello, my dear friends. I'm glad you've joined me here for the show. It's called Stand to Reason. And I'm Greg Kokel, standing to reason once a week, 3 hours at a time, with your calls, conversation for classical Christianity and classical Christian values. 26 years now. Wow. How'd that happen? Just kept putting one foot in front of the other, I guess. Anyway, we have a bunch of folks on the line right now, and I thought maybe since they've been waiting for an hour, I'd go directly to them. Possibly in the next hour, we'll have some commentary. It depends how his calls come in. So let's talk with Chris, who's been waiting for a while in Florida. Chris, I welcome you to the show. Hi.
Hello.
How you doing?
Good. Well, first of all, thank you for everything you do. Thanks for being one of the good guys. We really need you.
Oh, well, I sometimes wonder when I say one of the good guys if it sounds too self-serving, but it's nice of you to give the amen to that.
Yeah. You've been a mentor to me for the last few months as I try to put one foot in front of the other.
Good for you. And that's that's the way races are run. You know, it's the one who crosses the finish line. You know, some cross sooner than others, but that's all right. The issue is crossing the finish line because we're in our own race. We're not competing against others. We're just in our own race. So stay with it. Good for you.
Thank you. I have a question that's more emotional, I guess, than philosophical. I need your wisdom on something. My family lives overseas. I'm visiting them once a year, usually in the summer for a couple of weeks. That's my chance to see parents, grandparents, the whole family. I'm the only believer in the whole family. I have a grandmother who lost her husband of 60 years about 4 years ago. I don't have a good reason to believe that he knew Christ.
Right.
Yes, my grandma says he was a wonderful man, and that's my memory of him as well. But that also concerns me. Being wonderful is not what I see as the standard in Scripture. So I guess my question is, how do I press past all the general God is good, we're all going to go to heaven talk with her, and into the harsh truth of the gospel? How do I tell her the only way, to heaven is through Christ? When what I fear is the obvious question, well, what about your grandfather then? For my own comfort, I often think, I wasn't there when he passed, so I know he suffered for weeks. He was ill before he died, and he was in and out of consciousness. So for my own comfort, I like to think about the thief on the cross, so who knows what happened. But my prayer is being, Father, please send her someone else. Send her another old lady to break it down to her, And maybe use me to confirm it later. But don't let me bring fire and brimstone message to my grandma.
Well,
what do you think?
Yeah, I think your prayer is a completely not only understandable but legitimate prayer. There is no problem with praying that God would bring you an ally or allies to make the message more palatable. In this case, to your grandmother. So I think the prayer is fine. It may not get answered quite that way, and so you may be the point person, the point man, to address this issue more directly with your grandmother. But I think that you have suggested a possible solution in how you can talk about this with your grandmother. Clearly, and we're both in agreement on this, you want to communicate the truth of the necessity of Jesus for salvation. Because no matter how good any of us are, we all know inside that we fall short. We all know this. We all experience guilt about things we've done. We're aware of falling short, and so we know even as good as we can be, we still need the forgiveness that Jesus provides, and none of us are nearly as good as we think we are. But even with the flesh trying to make us feel better than we are, we still know that we fall short. So there's no question you want to be clear about the demands of the gospel or the nature of the gospel, that humans are lost in their own sin, their own crimes for God, against God, however those happen to be. And they need God's mercy. They need God's mercy. Maybe that's a way you can put this when you're talking. They need God's mercy. Sometimes when we say, you need to believe in Jesus, it sounds like a kind of odd requirement. It's like you've got to get this particular question right on your religious pop quiz, or you go to hell. It's not this. That's not the case at all. It's based on the fact that we desperately need to be rescued, and God in mercy is extending rescue to us. So I may be emphasizing God's mercy, but also emphasizing, I think the thief on the cross is brilliant. I think it was wonderful. I didn't think of that. You mentioned it, and right away when you did, I thought, this is excellent, because this can be used to make the point that though the mercy that God offers that we all need is available only through Jesus. That's why God had to become a man to rescue us. Ultimately, no one knows what happens with any individual the weeks or days or hours before they finally pass. No one knows what's going on in their heart and what God's doing during that time. And so there is, unless unless your grandfather was a Christopher Hitchens type or something like that, shaking his fist at God his entire life, we don't know what conspired between him and God. And so what you can do is you could leave that question as an open question with your grandmother for the time being, without compromising on the criterion, which is Jesus. God is the one who knows. And just as with Jesus, with the thief on the cross, something like that also may be the case with your grandfather. We don't know, so there's no reason to spend much time thinking about it. Rather, you suggest to her, what we spend time thinking about is the circumstance in front of us, what she knows about herself and her life and God, and what you know about Jesus that you communicate to her, so that she is making a decision based on the merits of her circumstance and not distracted by something that you don't ultimately know the disposition of. When you mentioned the thief on the cross, you should go back and read, just for fun, very short passages. I don't even know if they're in multiple Gospels, but there's not much on the thieves on the cross. But it says two things in the account there. The first thing it says is that the thieves, plural, were hurling insults at Jesus. And then one of the thieves apparently had a change of heart and realized that Jesus was the innocent man, they were the guilty ones, and then upbraided the other thief, and then turned and asked Jesus to consider him. It was an appeal for mercy, basically. So even the thief on the cross, started out nasty, and in those last hours, moments even, had a change of heart. And what this suggests is anybody could have a change of heart in the trying moments just before death and turn to the true God. Yeah.
And that's the hope. I guess it's not an empty comfort that I'm trying to create for myself. And I think it's easier for us, the people on the inside, so to speak, because we also have Well, I mean, we have His assurance. We will not the judge of all the earth do right. I know. It's easier for me to put my whole family in His hands
Yeah.
and trust Him with those salvation. I've tried to convince, and it's just not. It doesn't work.
Yeah. Well,
But it's a different story for people that don't, and we're
mhm.
trying to convince.
Yeah, I agree. I in the tactics book, I think in the last chapter, I talk about four rationales or reasons that people reject the truth, and one is for rational reasons that they have difficulties that they don't understand. Those can be corrected by apologetics. Some people have emotional reasons, and that's what you're facing. That I can't countenance the possibility that the Christian claim could be true, because that would mean that my loved ones are not with God. Now, it in one sense, it's understandable that people would be swayed a bit emotionally, but at the same time, it's tragic, because that's like saying, you go into a developing country and you say, look, if you take this medication, then you won't die of this disease like so many are doing. We have the medication we can make available to you. And then somebody says, well, if I took this medication, I would be affirming that my ancestors who died by the disease could have been rescued by the medication I now have, so I'm not going to take the medication. I mean, that's insane. But that's kind of what it's like when a person says, I'm not going to think about accepting Jesus because that would be affirming that somebody else might be in hell. Well, whether they're in hell or not is a matter of fact at that point. If Jesus is true, then they are, and nothing anybody's going to do is going to change that. And denying Christ for that reason is not going to change that either. One has to decide, gee, well, maybe I can be rescued even if my ancestors weren't, if this message about Jesus is actually accurate. So there's a kind of a crazy side to that, but one could understand the emotional grip this might have on people. And this is why I'm basically suggesting in sum that you put aside the question of your grandfather's salvation for the time being, kind of following this lesson that we get. One of the things we learned from the thief on the cross, that nobody knows, and in the last private moments, a transaction could have transpired between your grandfather and the Lord. So let's put that aside. Let's look rather at the facts of the real claim that Jesus has on the life of your grandmother and the mercy He offers her, and what is she going to do about that? And in fact, if you think about it, maybe this is another angle here. I'm not presuming one way or another on your grandfather's salvation, but if in fact he did do business with God, then he is with God now. And if your grandmother does not get straight with God, then she will not be with her husband for eternity, but she'll be separated from him. That's just another angle. That makes sense?
Right. Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
I appreciate your tender heart towards your grandmother, though, and your willingness to be the light in a difficult situation, even though you're praying for an ally to help out. Which
well, I am still going to.
Yes, I think you should.
And on a side note, I guess this is me looking for my way out, probably. But do I do that no matter what? Or I still wait for an opportunity, like in every other situation, like normal, engagement rules still apply.
Yeah, this is a hard question to answer because everybody's circumstance is different. I am caught between two worlds, and that is the immediacy of the importance of the gospel for someone the age of your grandmother, on the one hand, and also, an interest and concern of approaching the issue in a winsome and attractive way. Probably, if you err on the side of being a little bit more direct because of the importance of the issue. And I don't know any fancy way to do that. except for, Grandma, I want to talk to you about God. I want to talk to you about Jesus. And though, I love you and you've been a wonderful grandma to me, I don't know if this is true. Don't say something that's not, but let's just presume the best here. But when you stand before God, you're going to have to give an account for your life. And one of two things is going to happen: perfect mercy or perfect justice. And perfect mercy is forgiveness for everything you've ever done wrong, and God misses nothing. And perfect justice is punishment for everything you've ever done wrong, such as it is, and God misses nothing. And the difference between the two is the person of Jesus, the advocate. Maybe you could say something like that.
I just thought of something. I sent her More the Carpenter, a small little book.
Yeah,
maybe last year or the year before, and I know she read it. So that actually might help me a little bit.
Well, there's a springboard. Grandma, did you read the book?
Yeah.
What'd you think?
I just thought of that.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Maybe that's your ally. Maybe that's your answer to prayer right there. It's in a book. Josh McDowell is your ally.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Well, Chris, it's great talking to you, and I'm glad you called. And God's best to you when you talk to your grandma. Maybe if you want to call back in a couple months, you can let me know how that went.
Will do.
Okay.
Thank you so much again.
All right.
Bye-bye.
See ya. Bye. Sweet call. Greg Kokel, Stand to Reason.
You can find STR on Facebook, Twitter, Google+, and Pinterest. Interact with STR staff, post comments, get involved with other like-minded Christians. Want to know what is going on with STR? Speaking events, new podcasts, resources, and articles? Follow STR online. You can find all of our social media connections at str.org.
Thought Radio here, also known as Stand to Reason, committed to clearing up mental smog on spiritual matters. If you'd like to call in, you're welcome to do so. Of course, you may be listening not live. Live show is on Tuesdays from 4 until 7. That would be West Coast time, Pacific time here in Los Angeles. 855-243-9975 is the number, 855-243-9975. If you're outside the U.S., you can dial direct here to 562 area code 424-8229. Just a reminder, Rethink Apologetics Youth Conference coming up again in the end of September. The 26th and the 27th in Orange County at Crossline Church, same place that we've had it here in Orange County the last 2 years. The numbers have grown every year. Last year, I think it was 600 to 700 students. What a fabulous time we have. Well, you say, well, that's a month away. Actually, that's 2 months away. Yeah, but early bird registration ends August 15th, and the registration is $29. Goes up $10 after that, until the day of the registration, another $10 if you get it at the door. So instead of paying $49 or $39, you can pay $29. And what I suggest you do is you grab a whole bunch of friends from your youth group and your youth group pastor, and you just make it a group deal. And maybe you make a road trip from Arizona or San Diego or Central California, Northern California, whatever, and just come on down and be part of what they're doing. This is our attempt at training a new generation to rethink our worldview and give tools that will help students to demonstrate that Christianity is worth thinking about. Once again, September 26th and 27th, go to rethinkapologetics.com, rethinkapologetics.com. And in Memphis, Tennessee, Mike. Hello, Mike.
Hey, Greg. How's it going?
Good, thanks.
I am calling about a recent caller that you had who was calling about people who provide wedding services, such as bakers and florists and photographers.
Right.
And this caller, who was an anonymous caller, wanted your advice or thoughts about what they can do when they get inquiries from potential customers.
That's right. How could they comport themselves in a way that would provide them with the most protection to be able to follow their conscience, but not get afoul of the law? That's right. I remember that. fact, I'm
And
looking around for my notes because I told him 3 things and I copied them down because I didn't want to lose track of them.
And I want to bounce off of you a suggestion and see what you think of it.
Yeah, I think what you want to do is you want to bounce a suggestion off of me. You don't want to bounce off of me.
Right.
Okay. It's a pet
There we
peeve
go.
about the order. All right. Sure, I'd be glad
better
to.
choice of words.
Yeah, I'd be glad to respond. What do you got?
The suggestion is for the vendor to put into his standard contract a clause that says he or she reserves the right to pass out Christian literature at the wedding. And of course this wouldn't apply to a cake baker who just bakes the cake.
Yeah,
and
that's true. But a
the
photographer,
customer picks it up.
yeah.
But someone who actually goes to the event, like a photographer or a florist delivering flowers, they could put into their contract that they reserve the right to pass out Christian literature at the wedding in a non-disruptive way.
Mm-hmm.
And and one of the ideas is that it makes your Christian convictions more consistent, because it wouldn't only apply, like you could bring some tracts that say what the Bible says about homosexuality, homosexual behavior, some tracts about what the Bible says about drunkenness, because even it could be a heterosexual wedding where people are getting drunk, and I would think, to be consistent, a Christian photographer, for example, would or maybe should have just as much of or even more of a conviction about people getting drunk at a wedding than they would a homosexual wedding.
Yeah, I'm turning this idea over in my mind, and I'm really impressed by how clever it is. I don't know that you have to kind of expand this or something like that, because the intent isn't really to kind of morally monitor weddings in general. The intent is to protect yourself from being forced to have to participate in a same-sex union. But the way you do it is you set up the circumstances so the client says they don't want you. So you could simply say that I reserve the right to pass out literature pertaining to the biblical view of marriage, or something like that. Now, of course, the liability is, if this is in the contract, then those people that you're not concerned about, regular heterosexual marriages or unions, actually heterosexual marriage is a redundancy in my view. So marriage is heterosexual by definition, by nature, actually. But you're not going to exercise your option, because your goal isn't to evangelize at all weddings. Your goal is to make a statement regarding the nature of marriage when there is a same-sex union. Now, let's just say you had this, like you said, in the contract, and as I reserve the right to pass out literature regarding the biblical understanding of marriage at the weddings that I service.
Right.
The potential same-sex marriage or same-sex union client is going to say, no way, Jose. I don't want somebody that has that right, because that's disruptive. But no, I don't know how anybody can say that this is considered some kind of breach or violation of one's civil rights. Now, that doesn't mean you won't be hauled on, or the photographer won't be hauled up on civil rights charges, because it's like a sneaky way of getting around the law. Well, people have been using sneaky ways of getting around the law all the time that are legal. That's the difference between tax evasion and tax avoidance. It's illegal to evade. It's not illegal to avoid. And so you're trying to find a way around it if you're in that business. I think it's really clever. And maybe it can be refined, and people in the business, so to speak, can think about that. But what I had suggested to that photographer, at least one of the things, is that the photographer attempt to get the client, the same-sex union potential client, to disqualify him as a photographer. And there were a couple of things that I suggested that he do. But it really is the same basic strategy, but it's just a little bit more aggressive way of doing that. I'll be glad to do your wedding or your ceremony if I must, but I am going to reserve the right to pass out literature regarding this wedding. And
what I was thinking of was that I'm thinking of a photographer or a florist or some other type of vendor who has strong Christian convictions to begin with, and so it wouldn't just have to be at a same-sex wedding, just sort of as like playing the little chess game and try to who's going to win this thing.
Mm-hmm.
But it could be a way for God to help Christian vendors to sort of come out of their comfort zone and do a little bit of evangelistic activity,
right,
within their assuming they're
profession.
Self-employed,
yeah,
within their business,
the problem
in a non-disruptive way, of course.
Yes, well, the problem that I perceive here is that this is going to put legitimate business on the line for this vendor, the photographers say, because if that's in there and they draw attention to it, and it's a heterosexual union, and then they say, I want to also reserve the right to pass out tracts in some way or fashion in your wedding. Well, it may be that the people are going to object.
Right. That's
frankly,
a definite legitimate risk.
Yeah, and that means that they won't get their business, and just because they want to have an opportunity to witness their, and this could have a real negative impact on their livelihood. And I don't see any kind of moral obligation that you have to pass out tracts, so it's not a compromise not to do it. What I think, what you're looking for is kind of clever legal way to get the same-sex union potential client to disqualify you as a photographer. And that sounds like a clever way to do it. And I don't know.
That's just the beginning of it. What do you think about an inconsistency for that same photographer to say, I don't have any problem going to a big drunken party where everybody's sitting around getting drunk, but I have a big problem with the same-sex wedding?
Here's the answer to that. That a person is free to be inconsistent in his own behavior and reasoning. There is no obligation for him to demonstrate to the same-sex union people that he is fully consistent in all his reasoning, because he's not trying to persuade them of some broad moral principle that he's got to be consistent with. He's saying, under these circumstances, I want to be free. Well, under any circumstances, I want to be free to give my point of view about marriage biblically. That's it. And if you hire me, I'm going to exercise that.
Well,
now, if a person says...
what do you think generally about a Christian having convictions about one thing, but not having one sin, but not having convictions about the other sin?
Well, wait, no, he may have convictions about the other sin, drunkenness. It doesn't mean that he's obliged to pass out tracts against drunkenness just because he passes out tracts against something else. I don't think the charge of inconsistency is relevant here. It may be inconsistent, but so what? We're inconsistent in all kinds of things that we choose to do in our individual lives. Who do we owe consistency to? We don't owe consistency to anybody. The time when inconsistency is relevant is when we're trying to advance a moral principle that we think is obligatory on ourselves and other people. And somebody says, well, you are being inconsistent in this behavior compared to some other behavior, and so it looks like you're not really concerned about the moral principle. You just are creating this ad hoc justification so that it will it improves your lot. Then I think you have a legitimate complaint. If for example a person says abortion ought to be legal because a woman has a right to do whatever she wants with her own body. Okay, and then it turns out that same individual is saying, but it should not be legal for women who want to use abortion for sex selection. And then you think, well, wait a minute, your principles should apply equally in both cases since it's a matter of policy and law. And now you're being inconsistent in a way that is problematic. But if a person's own private life, they were just thinking differently and one way about one thing and inconsistently about another, well, they don't. There's no law that says they have to think consistently or act consistently. I just don't think it's the same kind of problem. And in this particular case, the concern is specifically, the concern is not proselytizing about moral behavior. The concern is not participating in a program that you think is not right. And so the threat of proselytizing against the behavior at a event where you are obliged to participate because the law illicitly demands it for some civil rights rationale. I forgot the beginning of my sentence now. It was too long, what I was trying to accomplish with it. But the point is you are trying to avoid being forced to do something that you don't want to do. This isn't really about proselytizing and passing tracts out and letting everybody know that you're a Christian and you have certain morals at every wedding that you photograph. Rather, it is a way of trying to avoid violating your conscience with regards to one particular kind of wedding. That's, I think, what's going on here, and that's why you don't have to worry about so-called consistency issues with drunkenness.
All right. Well, thanks for your thoughts, Greg.
Yeah, I think it's a clever idea, Mike. I hope people are listening, and maybe they'll find variations that might really be able to put into play. All right?
All right, hope so.
Yeah, thanks so much.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye. That is really clever. I have never... Now, of course, people are going to see right through it, but that does not matter. It does not matter if they see right through it, if they know exactly what you're trying to do. What matters is whether it's lawful to do it. Keep in mind, what the circumstances here, friends, is that the way the law is setting up, either with same-sex marriage laws or civil rights laws, is that people of conscience are, I think, illicitly being forced by law to do things that violates their religious conscience. Okay, so what do? You find a way out. And I don't care if people can see through what I'm trying to do. Oh, you're just trying to find a loophole. You're right, I'm trying to find a loophole. Because that's the only way for me to operate legally and also honor my conscience. You are forcing me to find a loophole. So I don't care if you think that's what I'm doing. Oh, I can see what you're up to? What do you mean, see what I'm up to? I'll tell you what I'm up to. All that matters is whether it's legal. Just think of the difference between tax avoidance and tax evasion. Tax evasion, you're hiding money, so you don't have to pay taxes on it. Tax avoidance, you're trying to find legal loopholes so you can keep the letter of the law but not have to give the government money that you can avoid giving them. You avoid. Same thing here. All right, let's find a loophole. Unfortunately, that's what we're being forced into. I see absolutely nothing wrong with that whatsoever. If that's the way we're forced to operate, so be it. Now, some of you thinking about this may come up with a variation on that, some clever variation, and maybe something like this could be more formalized. Fine, but you're trying to get around what the law requires. Of course, we're trying to get around it. That's what tax avoidance is, and a whole bunch of other things like this. When the law becomes overly burdensome and cumbersome, there is no problem with trying to find a legal way around it. We are obliged morally to keep the law, and if we can find a legal way around the intent of a particular law, there is no reason why we can't pursue that, not in my view at least. All right, let's take a break, and then I'll come back to your calls here at Stand to Reason.
At Stand to Reason, we depend on the support of donors to carry on our mission to equip Christian ambassadors. and your non-cash donation items can help. You can transform your old cars, cell phones, or other items into ministry impact by donating them to Stand to Reason. Think of it. Because of your donation, Christians just like you will be able to effectively share their faith and change the lives of others forever. To make non-cash donations of all kinds to Stand to Reason, call I Donate at 877-897-4273 or go to idonate.com and visit STR's page. They'll take care of everything for you and Stand to Reason. Just call them at 877-897-4273 or visit idonate.com. Thank you very much for making Stand to Reason's work possible.
So Amy Hall and I were just talking about our last caller's suggestion, and Amy said, that's brilliant. And actually, she made the point that you don't even have to really pass out tracts about same-sex marriage at that. You can just say religious tracts, and you can be whatever you want. And chances are probably pretty good that same-sex couples are not going to be interested in any religious material. But of course, you may find that there are same-sex couples who identify themselves as Christians, and therefore they're going to say, okay, you want to just pass out Jesus tracts? No, we'll make them available. We're okay with that. I think if you pass out tracts on God's plan for marriage, that would be a little bit more pointed. And what are they going to do? A contract's a contract. You can say anything you want in a contract. Them's the rules, right? These are your requirements. And nothing about it is specifically related to you doing services for them at a same-sex union. You arrange or you encourage the clients that you don't want to serve to disqualify themselves. And that was really the heart of the suggestions I had made to the other caller. I'm looking around for it here. Let's see. Yeah, here it is. The first thing I suggested was if somebody calls in and asks, do you do same-sex unions? You say, well, first I'm going to have to get some information about you and your partner. And then you get it before I can make any decisions. And you just don't answer the question till you get the information. And the goal there is to check out the bona fides of those who are claiming to need somebody for their photography. Because after all, you know that in things like this, there are going to be people that are calling up just to find somebody who says no, so they, even if they don't have any wedding in mind, so they can nail them with a civil rights charge. So you want to make sure, you want to check out the bona fides. And then you say, I'm going to need to check out this information before I can give my answer. Thank you for the call. And you hang up. You don't say you're going to call back. You just thank them, and you leave the ball in their court to call you. Now, you know how this works. If you're getting married, you got a bunch of people on your list for photographers. You're not going to play ball with somebody who's hard to get to and whatever. You're going to find somebody that's going to be easier. So chances are they're never going to call back again. You never have to cross that bridge. If they disqualify you at that level, perfect. Second, if they call back and it turns out it is a bona fide relationship and event, you can ask them, okay, you guys check out. Let me ask you, what do you want from a photographer? And at that point, you can simply, if they say they want whatever, you definitely want a photographer that at least is going to have a celebratory attitude regarding your union. So they're entering into the joy of the moment with you and trying to capture the wonder and the excitement, the electricity and the memories, right? That's what they're after. You want somebody who's on your side. At that point, you could say, I'm not saying I won't do the event, but I have a very difficult time personally with these kinds of events. Therefore, this kind of celebratory participation that you would ideally like to have, I can't provide. Maybe I'm not the best fit for you guys or gals. And again, let them disqualify themselves or make from being involved with you. Let them do the disqualification. If push comes to shove, if you've checked them out and they still call you back and they still persist, and then you told them you're not the guy, somebody else would be much better for you. You don't want me. I don't like these kinds of things. They bother me. I'm not going to give you my best work. Or actually, you don't want to put it that way. You will not get my best work. It's not that you would personally be giving them the short shrift on purpose, but you're not going to be able to do your best work when you don't believe in this kind of thing. If push comes to shove, maybe you just say no. Follow your conscience. Let them know, and then pray they don't file a suit. But I am thinking more and more what's going to happen in this situation. And advice is cheap because I don't have to suffer the consequences of this. But I don't know how we can do otherwise. I think sometimes we just have to say no. No. And that might cost you your livelihood. I don't say that lightly. But look, Dietrich Bonhoeffer said no. When the German government, the Third Reich, authored the Aryan Paragraph, which said that Jews cannot be in position of leadership, so Jewish converts to Christianity couldn't be elders in your church. Bonhoeffer says, the government can't tell me who has leadership roles in my church. That's not the government's job. That's the job of Jesus. So they drew a line in the sand. They suffered for it, but seems to me this may be what we have to do as well. All right, let's go to Columbus, Ohio, and Eric. Hello, Eric.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. Are you a Christian there in Columbus, Ohio? Eric?
Oh, no, it is Columbus, Georgia.
Oh, it's Columbus, Georgia. Well, that changes things considerably because I have some friends that pastor there and in Ohio.
But
and
yes,
so,
I am a Christian.
Well, yes. Well, I was going to ask you what church you go to, but I've actually taught in Columbus, Georgia.
Really?
Yeah, you're right there on a little river right by the border, aren't you?
Chattahoochee River.
Yeah. I can't remember.
To Phoenix City, the Sin City.
Yeah. Well, I can't remember the name of the church I taught at, but I taught there a couple of times, and there was a wonderful youth leader. His first name, I think, was Chris, but I think he's not there anymore. I think he moved. And then there was a guy I went fishing with. His name was Jim Money. Do you know Jim Money? He's an insurance salesman.
Jim Money. It sounds strangely familiar, but I can't say that I personally know him.
All right. Well, Jim Money and I went fishing, and I caught the largest bass of my life at the time. Well, it's the record holds about 814 or something like that in a farm pond. But anyway, if you run across Jim Money there in Columbus, Georgia, tell him I said hi.
I'll tell him.
It's not a very big town.
It's not big.
It's not a bustling metropolis.
It's not, but it's the biggest small town that I work in Atlanta, Georgia, so I get enough of the big city.
Yes. Right. Okay, so what's on your mind, Eric, in Columbus, Georgia?
Okay, real quick, and this might sound long-winded, but I'll try to talk fast.
Okay. It's all right.
Like I said, I work in Atlanta. I'm a steel inspector, so I do a lot of driving. And which is how I came across your podcast. So I've been studying apologetics, philosophy, biology, just kind of a broad spectrum of areas that that we encounter as Christians when we evangelize.
Right.
So, my stepfather is a Methodist minister. And so he's the one that got me in the church. Got the family in the church. My real father, he really didn't go to church growing up, but now he's a Jehovah Witness, and so I really don't bounce much off of him unless I'm trying to refute their doctrine.
Right.
Gently, of course. And so long story short, it's come to this point where when I approach my stepfather, the Methodist minister, with different, hey, did you know this? What do you think about this? Little quips that maybe I've heard off your podcast or whatever. I feel like now that I'm hitting a stone wall. He basically responds, well, what does that have to do with salvation? Is it necessary for salvation? And then, I think about it. Okay, is it essential? No, it's not.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, i.e., hey, Pops, what do you think about the Nephilim? Hey, Pops, what do you think the age of the earth is?
Right.
Hey, Pops, what do you think, this and that? I hold to the doctrines of grace. He holds to Wesleyan theology.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a little bit of, he wants to talk about free will. He's
right.
like, well, it doesn't matter, and so...
So he's giving you the brush off here, basically, with the statement, what does it have to do with salvation?
Yeah.
As if this is the minimalist approach. If it doesn't have to do with salvation, then it's not worth talking about, or he's not interested in talking about it?
Well, that's what it feels like.
Well, maybe maybe that's the question you should ask. So I have a bunch of Columbo questions that are running through my mind now regarding this. I might say, for example, okay, Pop, he says it doesn't have to do with salvation. You say, okay, so? Therefore what, Pop? What follows from that? Like, what does... do you mean we shouldn't be talking about it then?
Right. What do you mean? What do you mean by that?
There you go. It's a version of what do you mean by that. Now, if he means like, yeah, we shouldn't be focusing on those things, then it's fair to say, well, then why is it in the Bible?
Right.
If it's in the Bible, why would you say that we shouldn't be focusing on it if it's in the Bible?
Right.
Or maybe he'll say, well, apologetics doesn't really affect salvation. Okay, even if that were true, Pop. Therefore what? Therefore, we only study things that we only talk about things that affect our salvation? Well,
right.
then the Bible would be a lot shorter than it is, wouldn't it?
It would.
Why did God give us all those other things?
Yeah, I almost think that it stems maybe from an animosity generated from a discussion that him and I were having, about, obviously, I addressed the matter of election, predestination, things like that. It's obviously in the text.
Wow, yeah, I'll say.
So yeah, and so he holds Wesleyan theology. Well, I then asked him the question. Well, okay, then if it's a choice and you have to be presented with a choice, what about the? Obviously my question is, well, what about the people who never hear the gospel? And his response was, it was kind of alarming. It was alarming in the fact that he said, well, here's what I think. I think those people, the Bible says that, I was hungry and you fed me. I needed shelter and you gave me shelter. If you did these to the least of these, you did this unto me. And he kind of, equated that.
Like with a work salvation?
Yeah, it was real universalistic work salvation, and I guess that's my real, I guess that's my secondary question. Is like, and I
that raises other difficulties, doesn't it? If that's what he really believes, right? By the way, Jesus said, "To the degree that you've done this to the least of these, my brethren," and that I think is a significant qualifier. But I'm just going to set that out there, and you can chew on it. But I understand your concern about what your stepdad said. So, yeah, maybe he's got some personal things. And I don't know, maybe some people, they're not interested. They have an animosity, a little hostility to some of these things, and you just kind of let it ride and you don't press it very far. But I think this is a perfect circumstance for some Columbo questions, especially the ones I suggested, as long as you're going to be light-footed about it, since it seems like he's got some sensitivity to some of these things.
Yeah, I've taken a very peaceful approach.
Mm-hmm.
I obviously listened to your podcast, and I caught up with a caller who actually was trying to balance peace and truth.
Uh-huh.
It was some time ago, but I don't know if you remember it. And you basically told him that peace, the Bible speaks of peace very strongly.
Yeah.
And if it's inconsequential, then just kind of, and that's kind of what I've been doing.
Yeah, there's a high biblical ethic regarding having peace between you and other people, especially Christians. I mean, that's a big deal, and there are times when it's appropriate to break the peace for the sake of truth, but maybe not as often as some people think. I let a lot of things slide in my conversations with other people. Actually, I was having a conversation with my brother Mark, who's a pastor, yesterday, and he was firing off some thoughts and everything, carrying on, and I disagreed with some of the things, but I thought, well, I don't have to, plant my flag in every conversation. I can just let it slide. It's not the end of the world if he thinks differently than me.
Yeah. Well, it's working. It's working. He definitely approaches me with some literature, Wesley versus Calvin, stuff like that. But he's really yet to answer my question. What about if that's the view you hold? What about the people who never hear the gospel? And I guess that was the secondary, or I guess another question. But what is your response to that? What about the people who never hear the gospel?
Well, my response is a little bit involved, but I'll give it to you, bare bones, and that is God. First of all, God doesn't owe anybody salvation. So if there are people who never hear the gospel, God is not obliged to save them. He's only obliged to punish them if they do wrong. Okay, so that's that's one piece of the puzzle. Now that sounds pretty cold, like, oh yeah, so God just says he does. No, he does care, because they have been given revelation, and this is Romans 1. And the revelation that they've been given is a general revelation of the Father, not of the Son.
Right.
But characteristically, what they do is they suppress the truth and unrighteousness, and exchange the creature for the Creator, and worship that instead of God. So God gives them over. Now, the interesting thing here, I mean, the important little detail is that some might say, well, they haven't heard about Jesus yet. Well, wait a minute. Yes, they haven't, but they've heard about the Father, and their response to the general revelation has been to dismiss and rebel and suppress. And why should God then be obliged to give more detail when the detail that has been given already has been rejected? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, that's whether you're Calvinist or Arminian, this way of looking at it, I think, is still entirely legitimate. Now, in my view, I also have the sense, as a person who believes in sovereign grace, that God is saving people from every nation and tribe and tongue, and He is moving with His Spirit to draw rebellious people to Him, and He will accomplish that goal. And therefore, anybody who in any clime, any place in the world, who is genuinely seeking out God in truth and seeking out God's mercy, God is going to give them the information they need to be saved, which is Jesus, because He has already put the hunger and desire in there to begin with. He's already drawing them. That's why they're turning. He's not going to draw them halfway and drop them and then condemn them.
Well, would you say about my biological father, who is a Jehovah Witness and is actively seeking God, but obviously it has misinterpreted or been misled on some essential doctrine?
Yes. Well, there's some very important things going on there. One is that they have that the devil has misled them. There's 4 different passages that are explicit about the power of the devil to control people and hold them captive. But it also says in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 that people are able to be misled, in that case by the Antichrist, because they did not love the truth. So
Right.
there are two things going on. Yes, the devil's working, but also humans have the flesh and rebellion, and that they have to take responsibility for. People who get caught in false religions are deceived, but they are to some degree willfully deceived. Would be the answer I'd give, not because I know everybody's heart, but because I know what the Scripture says about every human being, and that's what I'm drawing my information.
Awesome.
All righty. Eric,
Greg.
yeah, in Columbus, Georgia. Great talking with you, and I appreciate your call. That's it for this hour, friends. I have more and another hour ahead if you care to listen, and if you have it on your station. If not, get the podcast. Greg Koch will stand to reason.